Buenas tardes. Vamos a demorar 2 o 3 minutos para el acceso de los asistentes que continúan ingresando a la sala. Esperamos que hayan disfrutado de la sesión de apertura y los invitamos a seleccionar el idioma tal como indica la pantalla en el círculo. Podrán seleccionar entre español e inglés. Ok, en esta sesión vamos a escuchar conferencias, 4 conferencias, 4 síntesis para poder habilitar la palabra de todos los asistentes. Me acompaña hoy la profesora teacher Eugenia Inés Carrión Cantón, compañera de trabajo, amiga, hermana, y intentaremos juntas moderar esta sala. Quiero presentar en primer lugar a Nicole Dunlap, quien ha presentado una propuesta cuyo título es Parece de la vida real, cómo los televidentes reaccionan a las representaciones de la pandemia COVID-19 en sus shows favoritos. ¿Está funcionando la traducción? Quiero saber si funciona bien. Ok. Ok. Gracias, Pedro. La siguiente conferencia estará a cargo de Renee Thomas Woods, que tiene que ver con tweeting sobre COVID-19, los altibajos y la necesidad de incrementar la literacidad crítica mediática entre los adultos. Luego escucharemos a Katherine Fry, quien presentó Nosotros somos los medios, COVID, vacuna y el entorno de los medios. Y por último, Walter Antonio Mesquita Romero versará sobre cultura mediática y trabajo escolar en tiempos de pandemia. Ok, Eugenia, ¿quieres hacer algún comentario?
Okay. Well, I will turn into English. So as this session is a bilingual one, I will try to balance this. First of all, thank you, Alicia, for your great job and your commitment in this conference. And I would like to welcome all the presenters and also the audience that is here with us today. So with no further ado, I think that we will listen to all the speakers right now, and then we will start opening discussion for the people to participate.
Les vamos a pedir a los disertantes que a medida que tomen la palabra puedan también presentarse ante esta sesión. Muchas gracias. ¿Quiere iniciar Nicole? ¿Que está en la sala Nicole?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Great.
I'm having a little trouble hearing at times. I can hear the interpreter very well, but anyone else, it's very low. So I like to hear you now.
Great, thank you.
So good afternoon, everyone, or I think it might be evening where some of you are. It's afternoon where I am. But my name is Nicole Dunlap, and I am a graduate student at California State University, San Bernardino. And I just briefly wanted to share with you some of the research that I did during the COVID-19 pandemic. I feel that it is extremely relevant given that we are still in it and we've been in it for a while, and it definitely changed all of our lives in some way, shape, or form. And so what I'm going to talk about, and I want to keep this discussion very casual, is one thing that I study is media. And I consider myself to be a critical media scholar. And with that, one thing that I observed during the pandemic is that not only were we experiencing the pandemic, but we were also experiencing it through the TV shows that we watch on a regular basis. So as we were looking at that, the thought came, oh, well, is this something we really want to see? Was my first instinct was, is this something we really want to see? Does TV typically takes us as an escape from our reality? You know, it's a leisure activity. It's an escape. It puts us in the world of someone else. But now our world is being put back to us. So what I did was I looked at a few different shows. I chose shows across different genres because I wanted to really deliver variety. So one show I looked at was South Park. Another show was Grey's Anatomy. And the final show was a show called Queen Sugar. So three vastly different shows. South Park, you know, is that animated crazy cartoon show on Comedy Central where they're in elementary school and the kids curse a lot and just have crazy antics. And then Grey's Anatomy, you know, set in a hospital, which is really perfect for this subject matter because a lot of us who don't work in healthcare settings don't have that firsthand experience of what's happening for healthcare workers. And then Queen Sugar was actually a totally different take because we're talking about a show that's set in the rural South. These people run a farm and their whole world gets shattered. So, and it was just such different dynamics. So one thing that we looked at was each show put the pandemic in some sort of way. And so with what I wanted to know was, how do viewers, people who are avid viewers of these shows, how do they feel about that? So each response was different. And I'll start with Queen Sugar because Queen Sugar had one of the most interesting responses. Many people said that Queen Sugar, it felt like they were watching their own lives. And especially because what Queen Sugar did was they put the dates as titles of each episode. So March 13th, 2020 was an episode. And when we saw the Black Lives Matter movement really, really grow larger with George Floyd and all that, that was an episode. And so all of those experiences that many of us had were being on television, but in a fictional world, but it was a lot of our reality. And also with that, a lot of people said, you know, it brought up some anxiety, it brought up some emotion. And in some moments were very triggering for a lot of viewers. There were some episodes where people were not wearing a mask and viewers felt that these people should be wearing a mask. You know, it was just because we were living it at the same time. And then with Grey's Anatomy, very similar, I interviewed people who actually worked in healthcare and who were in the emergency rooms during the pandemic. And a lot of them felt same thing. It was very real to them, and it was a lot of the experiences that they demonstrated were what was happening. And we have to think now the pandemic, it's a little different now, but back then it was a lot different than it is now. You know, now we have vaccines and we made a little bit more progress, but at that time there was so much that we did not know and had no answers to, and we were all looking for answers. So a lot of those people who were Grey's Anatomy viewers were also healthcare workers, and they said that they shared a lot of the same experiences. Although many of them did mention that, because television can embellish at times, that a lot of it did feel false, and that they didn't like how some of them handled, as a healthcare show, how some of them handled the virus within the show based off of their own experiences. So healthcare workers with the Grey's Anatomy show had a lot of different nuanced perspectives on it. But the one that was kind of the most interesting to me was the South Park people, because none of them were triggered and none of them were upset. And I think it really boils down to the genre of the show. And I watched all the episodes that had to do with the COVID pandemic, and they all had different takes. But the South Park people, one, in doing the research, they're very hard to get a hold of. They didn't want to talk about South Park. They want to watch South Park, but they don't want to talk about South Park. So that was fun tracking them down. But also, it was just very interesting because the people who were watching South Park were just very nonchalant, like, oh yeah, you know. And I asked them, you know, are you watching any other shows? And those people who were watching South Park, but were watching these other shows that were more based in drama, they didn't seem to be swayed either way. So maybe they're finding a certain level of balance through humor and drama that isn't triggering. But for those who maybe don't watch the South Park, but they watch the Queen Sugar type shows or the Grey's Anatomy shows, those people, they really put themselves into the shows. One person mentioned that there was a scene in church in Queen Sugar, and this particular person lived in Detroit, and mentioned that they had went to church that weekend. They had a big major church event, and just feeling so much anxiety and feeling uncomfortable at church because they knew that there was a pandemic out there. They didn't know what exactly was happening, but the anxiety began there right before the shutdown. So even right before we saw everything unfold, these people were experiencing it, and it was very much reflected in these shows. So one thing that I took away from my research is, yes, it definitely felt like real life, rewatching these shows and reviewing them within the pandemic. And our experience of the pandemic in March 2020, now looking backwards, it seems like a short time ago, but it feels kind of like a long time ago also. But in discussing it with these people that I talked to, it definitely brought up the emotions, particularly with the dramas. And I want to thank you all for hearing what I had to say about that. And I really hope you have a good conference.
Súper interesante, Nicole. Muchísimas gracias. Creo que tendremos unas cuantas preguntas.
Okay.
Ok,
So I think
creo que tendremos muchas preguntas a partir de tu exposición. Quedo pensando en ellas y me gustaría invitar a Katherine Fry para que pueda tomar la palabra. Muchas gracias.
Okay. Would you prefer that I begin and we'll wait for all the questions at the end? Is that the preference? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it possible for me to share my screen because I have some PowerPoint slides I want to show?
Yeah. You're ready for
No
that.
problem.
Ana.
Thank you
Sí,
so
por
much.
supuesto.
Thank you. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. My name is Katherine Fry. I'll just say a little bit about me and a little bit about what I want to talk with you about this evening. Um, I'm a media literacy professor and educator. I teach at Brooklyn College of the City University of New York, but I also co-founded a media literacy education organization at the grassroots level in New York City in 2007. It was called The Lamp, and it lasted until 2019, so it had a good run. Sadly, it folded, but I learned an awful lot doing that community-based work. And now I took all of what I learned at the Lamp and I teach it to my graduate students, mostly graduate students at Brooklyn College, to teach them to become media literacy educators in the community as well. So what I'm going to talk about today is specifically about COVID and COVID vaccination as a social issue, a problem, something that we're dealing with in the moment. But I'm going to talk about it from the perspective of a model of media literacy education that I have developed and that I'm working on right now. So I want to begin with a quote from Neil Postman, and I don't know how familiar people are with Neil Postman's work. Neil Postman is a media ecologist. I consider myself a media ecologist as well. And just to preface that, just to explain a little bit, that means that we're very interested in media environments. And as Neil Postman says in the quote here, societies are held together. In fact, cultures are the modes and patterns of communication. And modes and patterns include the media themselves. They create these environments. The environments themselves have a logic to them. And everything that follows within the culture follows from the logic of the dominant medium. We are currently living in an electronic digital environment, and that has profound impact on everything that we know about the world, and I would argue the way that we act in the world. And it's from that perspective that I feel media literacy education really needs to move forward. Okay, so I think that it's important to acknowledge that at the outset that most of what we know about COVID-19 in particular is from the digital media environment and our engagement in it. In other words, ask yourself, how do you know anything about the pandemic at all? Obviously, you know about it from having conversations with people in a face-to-face setting, but you also have conversations with people in the digital environment. You're getting information in the digital environment through various different sources. And by digital environment, I also include your phone. I mean, we have these devices that connect us that, we're right there in the environment itself. So we need to acknowledge that we are part of this environment, which is why the title of my talk includes Media Are Us. Okay, how do we share that environment? How are we, operating in this environment? That's the place to start. Okay, now, what I'm very interested in exploring, and I'm actually working on a much bigger project now where I'm trying to tear this apart and explain it in detail. But I'm very interested in the biases of the digital media environment in particular. And when I say biases, I'm not talking about cognitive biases. We often, use the term bias to talk about our own personal biases or political biases of the media, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not talking about those kind of biases here. I'm talking really about characteristics of media. So in the digital environment, there's a particular bias of space versus a bias of time. In other words, in the digital and media environment, space is completely collapsed and time becomes something different as well. This is where media ecology gets quite philosophical, which I find incredibly important and helpful to understand. Something that's a little less philosophical to understand about a characteristic of the digital media environment is the fact that information hierarchies that used to exist in traditional media have been completely collapsed now, which means anyone who has access and the means has access to the digital environment. So that scares traditional media to death, and that's why they're busy trying to figure out how to regain their power. And just as an aside, I'm watching with fascination what's going on with Facebook right now, and I don't know that we'll have time to get into a lot of discussion about it. I imagine during the conference this weekend, there's a lot of discussion about Facebook. What's also important to understand about the digital environment is that the notion of truth or facts are put into totally different contexts, and they emerge differently in this environment where information hierarchies have been collapsed and power is more dispersed. Okay, so I'm just going to start with those thoughts. I realize this can all be unpacked a lot more, but I simply don't have the time, and I welcome questions at the end and urge you to look for the work that's coming out as a result of all this. So in a nutshell, my approach to media literacy is it's media literacy meets media ecology meets critical pedagogy. So without doing death by PowerPoint, I just want to say a few things. I believe strongly in a holistic or a comprehensive media literacy. And that means that a media literacy where you're not just examining content and you're not just examining power relations, but you're also looking at the entire media environment, and you have an understanding about how the environment operates and how you operate in this larger environment. What I'm struggling with right now is explaining what a media environment is. And it would be really helpful for me if you could tell me where the confusions are, because this is something that's crucial to my work at this point. So one thing that I can say is that the digital media environment has certainly changed how we organize our lives. It's organized how we live right now, and not just during COVID, but this started before COVID. In other words, the digital media environment means that we work differently, we connect with people differently, our relationships are different, and we need to understand this as an environmental issue. Okay, so media literacy education needs to include learning tools that teach people how to understand media from this sort of like larger environmental perspective. Okay, and we can certainly talk about COVID-19 from this perspective, and more specifically, the issues around vaccination. Okay, I'm going to be really mindful of time because I know that there are other speakers and other people want to ask questions and discuss. So I'm going to try to go through some of these slides rather quickly. This is a model that I've developed. It's called the Dynamic Media Environment Model. And there are 4 major components to it: content, power, context, and paradigm. And I was really intrigued by the atomic metaphor, because I think the atomic metaphor works well to illustrate how these 4 major components of culture and the social structure are in constant changing dynamic relationship with each other, but they're driven by a nucleus, which is the medium, the dominant medium or medium form. And together, they all create a media environment. So let me just illustrate this a little bit more. Like, what am I talking about? So what I'm saying is that this is a media literacy education model, and the model obviously needs to include content. It's crucially important to understand messages. And by content, I mean like any sort of content that's created for any medium in the form of sound, image, or text, and so on and so forth. So those are the modes. I'm going to be specifically talking about vaccination information as content in the next slides that follow. Context here refers to different cultures, different geographic places in the world, different time periods in history. It's really important that when people talk about media, they understand the context of different communication or media situations. So context is a really important component of this model. Power and paradigm are very, very important as well. So power is I think the focus most of the time for critical media literacy education, and I'm talking about economic power, the power of owners, the power of government, the power of money. These are really important drivers within culture, and they're drivers within media, but they cannot be examined to the exclusion of the other three, is my argument. It's also important to look at paradigm. And by paradigm, I'm talking about people's worldviews. What kind of belief systems do people bring to their media, the way that they interact with media? What kind of content do we get as a result of various different belief systems, worldviews, religion, politics, values, all of these things? People bring worldviews to their media use and to their media production and to their understanding of media. And it's very important, I would argue, that we understand that about how humans work. And I've artificially separated out all four of these, but I have to continue to say that they work in dynamic relationship with each other in a media environment to create a culture. Okay, so just to recap a little bit, I would argue that it's very important that one understands all of the components of this model to be fully media literate, and it makes it very complicated, obviously. We need to understand the ways that they work in dynamic and dialectical relationship with each other, and that this comprehensive media literacy model that I just showed you is sort of like, it seems theoretical and macro, but what I do as a media literacy educator is I take pieces of it and bring it down to earth and create learning tools for each one of them. So this is what I teach my students to do as well. And this is what I'm going to be including in the book that I'm writing, is I'm going to have very specific learning tools that I include for each of the components. I'm very interested in taking theory and bringing it down to practice, and then taking that back to theory. Okay, so very briefly again, I have a little bit to say about Facebook and Twitter as environments. One can look at the digital media environment as a whole, or you can take a particular medium within the digital media environment and look at it as an environment unto itself. And when you do that, what you're doing is looking at the characteristics of that medium, and the characteristics include the constraints of the medium. What Facebook, so it's Facebook and Twitter are two that I chose. So Facebook and Twitter are both, social media platforms that people use a lot. They get a lot of information from Facebook and Twitter. One would argue that a lot of people get all their news from Facebook and Twitter. And so it's important to be mindful of what the constraints are. Okay, they're both algorithm run, obviously. And so it's important to understand the algorithm as a major constraint on the kind of information one has access to, and also the algorithm as the major economic driver. And to be completely aware of the fact that all the data surplus that is available to Facebook and Twitter as corporations means that data are collected, and there is this surveillance capitalism concept that people also really need to be aware of. And this is obviously coming out right now with the Facebook's most recent debacle. The way that people engage on these media is very, very constrained. Facebook and Twitter as corporations fluctuate on their policies about misinformation. And of course, this is the subject of so much more conversation. Facebook and Twitter allow for everyone's voices. And so, talking about the collapse of space and time, these voices can be heard in real time all over the world very quickly. And so it's this way in which Facebook and Twitter work with space and time, how they constrain conversation, how they're beholden to the algorithm and to profit. These things are all really, really important, but not to the exclusion of understanding the people who are active on Facebook and Twitter. So I just looked a little bit at vaccination hesitancy groups on Facebook, and I looked at some of the studies that have been done, other people who've looked at these vaccination hesitancy groups, and they really, you know, they form around, sometimes around for religious reasons. That's the paradigm issue. Sometimes it's philosophical, sometimes sometimes it's political. People have all kinds of groups that bring them together. So that's where, you know, like I said, that's their paradigm. And they span the continuum of hesitancy. There is often this issue of reductionist thought and small world theory, which means that they really only want the people who understand them and are in their world to be part of their group, you know, and they're constrained in their communication, as I suggested in the last slide. All right, so Twitter, you know, Twitter is even more constrained than Facebook. You only get so many, you know, you only get so much to say on Twitter. Although people use that in a very creative way, I found. Twitter tends to be even more highly charged than Facebook. And it's that emotional charge and that engagement that Twitter loves, because it means, you know, a lot more money for them. There's a lot more conspiracy on Facebook, studies have shown. But it is even more tightly constrained. So, okay, so what does any of this have to do with anything regarding COVID vaccination that's helpful for media literacy educators? Well, my first point is that this is helpful for media literacy educators because it's important that media literacy educators cover all of the constraints of the digital environment and all of the 4 components and how they are constrained and how they work in relationship within the environment around vaccination issues. But you need to step back, and I'm very much a media literacy activist. So, and I know most of the people in this community are as well. And I think that's a really important part of media literacy. I don't think that there's a point to doing media literacy unless you have action as one of your goals. So you need to decide what your final goal is. Like, what is it that you want to accomplish? Knowing what you know about the digital environment, what do you want to accomplish and what do you want to teach to accomplish? So you need to identify that. If it's to have everyone become vaccinated so that we can put an end to the COVID pandemic, that's one thing. That might not be your goal, but that could certainly be a goal. Okay, so how do you create messages in the digital environment in order to make that happen? Well, you need to then, you do that only after you understand the paradigms of knowledge and belief that you're up against, what their dominant narratives are, what is the tone or style of their communication. You need to do your homework. You need to understand some of the history of it. It requires a lot of work is what I'm saying. It's not an easy, I want to make this as complicated a process as possible because I think media literacy is the vital educational issue of the 21st century, and it needs to be complicated. And we need to, you know, we need the help of scholars from a lot of different areas. We need the help of activists. Everyone needs to be part of it. Okay, finally, I will stop after this last slide. Basically, my argument is that understanding the media environment as a dynamic and dialectical whole is the key to achieving a truly comprehensive media literacy, and that comprehensive media literacy is vital to creating meaningful change in the world. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Katherine. It was really interesting, your presentation. I am thinking about many comments and questions, and I'm sure that many people here that are listening to this wonderful presentation would like to intervene in some minutes. Before, I think that we are going to listen to our last speaker, that is Walter Antonio Mesquita Romero. That is, I think that Walter is here. Are you here, Walter? Walter? Well. Well, if Walter is not here, I believe, Alicia, que
Tampoco
podemos,
estamos
no,
ubicando
Renee.
a Renee
Renee.
Thomas Woods. ¿Está Renee? No. No, abrimos entonces
Okay.
a
All right.
preguntas.
Good. So we can open to questions now and comments. Maybe I can start with a comment just while Katherine was finishing her presentation. I was just thinking about this, I mean, the relationship between Nicole's presentation and Katherine's one, and I wonder how far does the pandemic contribute to this raising of awareness of critical media literacy in general terms for common people, like not only for scholars, but on the contribution of this raising awareness. Maybe you can give us your impressions about that.
Yeah, Nicole, did you wanna jump in?
Go ahead, Katherine.
Okay. Well, first of all, I wanted to say, Nicole, it was really interesting to me that you studied those programs and you know, and the way that they dealt with like real life issues that were happening in the moment. That's so interesting because I feel strongly, I've been studying news for a long time, and I've always felt like people consider news to come from a lot of different places, including narrative television programs. And I give a lot of credence to producers who decide to go for it, you know, and work with real-time issues. I just have a quick question for you, Nicole. So did you, if I missed this in your presentation, I apologize, but did you say that the people that you interviewed, they felt like the television shows did justice to the severity of COVID-19? We'll just start with that one.
Sure.
Yeah.
In many ways, yes, but in some ways, no.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, in my opinion, a lot of it has to do with, well, they wanted to get these shows out, you know, and they wanted to reflect this. And we have to remember, everything shut down, like everything just, it was like a light switch, right? So some of these shows were in the middle of filming when this happened. And so, for example, Queen Sugar, the director of Queen Sugar is Ava DuVernay, and she decided, okay, I'm gonna show what is happening. So it was just very interesting because some did feel like it did it justice, but with like South Park, that didn't even really seem to be a factor in it to those who watch South Park.
Right. So, yeah, I think my voice is just, I'm hearing a distorted version of my voice. It's very creepy. Is everyone hearing it that way? Okay. So yeah, okay. So you know, the producers of those programs and the genres themselves, I think you're spot on that they have a lot to do with how it's presented. The thing, to get back to the earlier question about people's involvement, I think that was it, or I'm sorry, if I'm misinterpreting your question, the way that I wanted to answer it, or the way that I will answer it, is to say that I'm really, really struck when I'm, you know, kind of witness to all of the COVID information on Facebook and Twitter, for example, because those are the places where I've been paying the most attention to the talk, and then hearing other people talk about the way that Facebook and Twitter and COVID-19 and all of the anger that's stirred up. It's just so much anger. And this is where I, as the media literacy educator, want to say, okay, but do you understand that you know, Facebook and Twitter, the owners, you know, the corporate entities that they are, want you to be really angry. They want you to be really engaged. Please don't give them that, you know, their due. Please, you know, try to understand where people are coming from. I am by no means a vax hesitancy apologist. No way. I'm totally pro-vaccination, I have to tell you. But I also know people who are very vaccine hesitant, and I'm trying to understand where they're coming from, because they bring worldviews to their, you know, sometimes they seem crazy, but to them, it's not crazy. So I think there needs to be a lot of empathy, I think, for people's positions sometimes in order to move forward. And I get very frustrated because I think most people don't understand how the digital environment works in the background there to whip us all up into this frenzy that's only putting money in Mark Zuckerberg's pocket. All right. So yeah, so I guess that's how I'll answer your question. Yeah, it's just
Katherine and
Okay.
Nicole, hay muchas preguntas en el chat. Me gustaría invitar a quien se anime a abrir su micrófono para plantear alguna y que circule la palabra también entre ustedes y Katherine y Nicole puedan responder. Es súper, súper interesante el tema. Jennifer Posner, maybe?
Oh, there's another Jennifer in the chat. I don't want to speak if it's not my turn.
Okay.
Who's maybe one of the moderators can call on a person's full name. So
yeah.
Okay.
Before we do that, I do want to offer some commentary, Katherine, because you mentioned something that was very important. How we get our news is extremely important. And even through these shows, you know, when we're studying media, and all of us who clearly care about media and we practically live and breathe it and criticize and are over analyzing, many of us are probably like myself, I can't just watch a movie, right? You know, you can't just watch the movie, you have to really think about it. So we're always looking at, with these shows, those are a way that people are getting their information and insight on how they should behave towards things like the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And then when you mention social media, that adds a whole nother layer because people are heavily influenced by one another. And so now they're getting insight on how they think they should behave. And it's easy to get lost in those things instead of just understanding science. And I actually work in a healthcare setting. I don't work in a clinic, but I work in the back, you know, and so I don't see patients. But within the clinic, we have about 900 employees, and there's 200 that refuse to vaccinate. They're extremely hesitant. And so one thing you brought up was empathy, which we've been discussing heavily, is having that empathy for the hesitant person, because for one, I'm super vaccinated, like got it really early. Like I'm very pro-vaccine, but how information is delivered and in what medium and what way is so important. And if they don't have the media literacy that maybe people in this group have, then the information that's delivered to them may not be safe information. So
yeah. And I'll just follow up. You're absolutely right about that. And I noticed that someone else had asked a question in the chat about disinformation. So, I mean, it's such a thorny issue, right? Because it's true that depending upon what community you're in and where you're getting your information, which medium you're using, you know, which environment that you're plugged into, you're going to get a certain kind of information. And there's been some really interesting work that's been done by journalists, actually, where they have gone into various different communities in the United States where there is either a heavy anti-vaccination sentiment or vaccine hesitancy. And they found that there are a lot of different reasons for it. Partly it has to do where people are getting their information, but a lot of it has to do, well, wait, let me rephrase that. Partly it has to do where people are getting their mediated information from the digital environment. And a lot of it has to do with their interpersonal relationships with each other in the community. And it was found that the community structure, the sort of relationships within the community play a huge role in whether or not people feel like they can actually talk about the fact that, well, maybe they do want to get a vaccine. I mean, and it's the I guess it's the fear of losing their community connection that keeps a lot of people from following what would be good public health advice and that they probably know somewhere would be helpful. So communicate, I guess, I feel like I'm going all over the place right now. Communication connection happens not just digitally, but also interpersonally. And so that's why in my model, I include paradigm, because that's such a huge piece of how people operate in the world. And that's why I feel like we need to be empathetic to them. And that's why I feel like there's a lot of follow the leader in terms of where are you going to get your information. I feel like I've lost my thread a little bit, but there's just so much to this conversation. Anyway.
Coincido, Katherine, que es un tema preocupante, importante, y mencionaron muchas veces la necesidad de la educación en la literacidad crítica. En la exposición de Nicole podíamos ver de qué manera el cine, los shows, también comunican un mensaje. Muchas veces intentan humanizar de alguna manera lo que los medios muestran como algo sensacionalista y que produce claramente un efecto absolutamente contrario. Y aunque las películas, los shows intenten humanizar, también son muy cuidadosos, creo yo, en no definir una postura exacta respecto de ser pro vacunas o anti vacunas, sino centrarse en la humanización de la situación. No así los medios, que pareciera que mientras más espectacular o más sensacionalista puedan sonar, más audiencia van a tener. ¿Qué te parece, Nicole, respecto de esta perspectiva de humanización en algunos mensajes?
So let me make sure I understand correctly. So you're asking because the media tends to sensationalize information, but at the same time trying to humanize it as well. Are you asking if they made it more interesting, would that have a better effect on how they receive the information? Is that correct?
En realidad, creo que en la ficción del cine y de las series hay más humanización que en los medios de comunicación. Okay.
Oh, so the fiction of TV shows are more humanizing than like news media?
Let me see
Es una pregunta, claro.
Okay, I'm just making sure. Okay, so if I'm understanding correctly, are you asking if, I'm sorry, I'm a little confused because of the way it came out.
Nicole, let's see if I can help you a little bit.
Okay.
I think that the idea that Alicia wants to put through is that there are like two different approaches towards this pandemic issue. On the one hand, in the fictional world, it seems that there is a focus on humanization, right? And on feelings. And as you mentioned, people were not wearing masks in the shows. And on the other hand, when we refer to the news and the media in general terms, there is a like a spectacularization, like a show business of the vaccination and the show of the COVID pandemic, we would say. I mean, and she wanted to know what was your opinion about, if you agree with this. I mean, like two different approaches.
Okay, I'm with you now. I thought that's where it was going, but I wanted to be sure. Thank you so much for your clarification.
All right.
So it's actually interesting that you bring that up, because there is a dualism there, and it's everywhere. But you would think it would be the opposite, right? Especially we've been groomed to understand and learn that we must trust our news people, but then sometimes our news is not always right. You know, it depends on our sources and things like that. And there's a lot of people who are creating what they pass off as news, which wouldn't necessarily be following the rules of how you deliver news. And so with that knowledge, a lot of people are left to look to the fiction, you know, especially because when we're watching something, if we see ourselves in it, then we can put ourselves in it, and it really becomes our reality, and it influences us in some ways, maybe not all, but in some ways. Like, for example, Queen Sugar, out of the 3 shows, that was the show when watching, I felt the most relatable to. This is a African-American family. They're trying to pick up the pieces. They're running a sugarcane farm. They're in the rural South, and I'm in California, so I can't relate in that aspect. But and just their struggles as a Black family and their experiences as a Black family, adding on the pandemic, adding on George Floyd and Black Lives Matter, adding on the election, everything else that happened in that first year. If you just think back to that first year, I saw myself in that, because that was the most relatable to me. So in some ways, that's why people are turning to fiction, which is unfortunate that we can't always trust the news, some news sources and things like that. And, you know, especially with our recent history, just it's been a lot. And a lot of times people don't know where to turn. And if they're not people who are constantly analyzing media, where do they turn? And how do we tell someone who doesn't care to analyze media, they just want their news, you know, where to go, where to look, what to read, what to look for, you know? And so, and what to look for that might be false on Facebook, even, you know, and things like that. So I think the pandemic has definitely opened up a lot of things, so like uncovered some stones that we need to look under, definitely, because like you mentioned, the dualism, like, it's actually the opposite, when it really should be the news is giving us the humanization and the fiction is giving us the sensationalism, but it's turned into quite the opposite. Thank you for that question.
If you don't mind, I would love to say more about that. This topic is so important. With regard to the notions of truth and reality, my own position is that it's all kind of dependent, right? It all kind of depends. It kind of depends on the context of where you are, geographically, culturally, the time in history. It also depends, like the truth or reality of something also depends upon your worldview, right? Your worldview will determine. But just if we're just going to talk about content, which is what you've been talking about, Nicole, it's really important too to understand that you will get a very different sense of the reality or truth of something if you're only paying attention to sound media, or only to television, which is a combination of sound and images, or if you're just reading. All of these modes of communication operate on us in a very different way. They have their own biases, to use that term again, to various different parts of our senses and our brains. And so I'm always really careful about using the terms truth or reality, because I'm not convinced that there is some sort of objective truth out there. And I think call me crazy. Not everyone agrees with me on this, but I think media literacy education could go a lot further if it made clear to people that there are all these various different components at play, and you need to understand that they are at play before you can make any sort of like good critical assessment of the information and how it works for you where you are. It's so complicated, but absolutely fascinating at the same time.
Mhm. Okay, I think that there is someone that would like to contribute. Maybe Ivan, I think that you would like to ask a question or contribute with a comment.
Sí, es una pregunta. Muy buenas tardes, buenas noches, según los países. Mi nombre es Iván, de Argentina. Esto es una pregunta para Katherine, ¿sí? Estuve escuchando ahí su presentación, donde habló tanto de los medios masivos de comunicación y también de los medios digitales, ¿sí? En mi ciudad se ha dado un fenómeno muy particular con el COVID, porque los medios masivos locales están prácticamente monopolizados por el gobierno, ¿sí? Local. Entonces, una cosa es lo que se presentaba a través de los medios masivos de comunicación, televisión, prensa, y otra era la visión que se presentaba de la situación sociopolítico-sanitaria a través de los medios digitales, ¿no? Es como que había dos realidades diferentes, una a través de las redes sociales y otra diferente a través de los medios masivos de comunicación. Entonces, mi planteo es, desde la literacidad crítica, merecen los mismos dispositivos de análisis, hay que analizarlo de manera diferente. Sin duda que hay una diferencia, pero se los puede colocar como dos grupos distintos.
Okay, so I want to make sure that I understand the question clearly. So I don't know what country you're from. I can imagine maybe which country you're from, but I will give you a bit of a parallel example. I was in Turkey in 2015, and while I was there, I interviewed students that I was teaching about the Taksim Square protests in 2013. And in Turkey in 2013, during these protests at Taksim Square, the Turkish government tried to shut down Twitter, but they were unsuccessful. But what they did is they completely took control of all broadcast media and did not allow anybody who was watching television to see what was going on in Taksim Square. But my students told me that they got all their information about the protests from Twitter specifically, because the government hadn't caught up yet with Twitter in 2013. So I was really fascinated to hear them talk to me about that moment as being their moment of awakening. And that's where the big divide took place between them and their parents, for example, because their parents had no idea anything was going on. And they were trying to explain to them, there's like a huge political protest going on right now in Istanbul, and we're getting all of our information from Twitter in real time. And so I'm not sure if your question for me is, if the question is this what's at stake? You know, the government shutdown of media? Or are you asking me, is it important to elevate social media in instances like that when the government does shut down media? Is that what you're asking me about?
Sí, serían, bueno, a partir del comentario haría ya dos preguntas. La primera es el análisis que se haría de los medios desde la literacidad crítica. ¿Es diferente con los medios masivos de comunicación de la que son con los medios digitales? Sería la pregunta un poco original. Y después, cualquier grupo de poder,
Yeah.
¿sí?
Okay. Sorry.
Y cualquier grupo, y agrego una pregunta, ¿no? Por el comentario, cualquier grupo de poder, llámese poder político, poder económico, mediático, puede apoderarse de todos los medios. ¿Es un riesgo también?
Well, I can Well, when you're talking about taking over something, you're talking about power, right? So the initial answer to the question is any medium can be examined in terms of like, where's the power? Who has the power? And what, what is the major sort of like ideological, I'm not using paradigm right now, like the ideological, what's the idea system that's being put forth? So when a government takes control of media, they have complete control over the paradigm and they have complete power. They have it all. And so all of the content will reflect it within the context of the country or the place where this is happening. So I would say that you can take that same way of thinking and apply it to social media as well. Because social media can also be, turned off or turned on by a government at will. And that's an examination of power. That's where you're looking at where power operates. That's why I like to look at these other concepts and not just focus on like, what's the content of the media? Because there are so many things that are at play. And so your question is a great question because it forces me to have to explain my model in terms of your very specific perspective and where you're coming from. So yeah, thank you for that. I don't know if I answered your question, but it made me have to think about it in those terms.
Quiero intervenir para decirles que como en la organización seguramente cada exposición es muy sintética y el tema da para profundizar mucho más, habrá un espacio en la página del Congreso donde cada expositor podrá desarrollar, ampliar a través de una grabación o un documento escrito su ponencia. Y ahora quisiéramos, te doy la palabra, Eugenia, para presentar a Roini.
Okay. Just in the last 5 minutes at least, we would like to share some ideas with Renee Thomas Woods that is here with us.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
I was having some technical issues and couldn't join in. I've been on the hold pattern for quite a while, so thank you for welcoming me.
Don't worry, you're all welcome to share your ideas. Sorry about the time. We have some time constraints, but you're all welcome.
Okay, thank you. So I'll be brief, as brief as I can. So I wanted to talk about my research with Twitter use of adults during COVID, during the second wave of COVID, and some of the things that I found out about their use and their views of social media. So the purpose of my study was to explore the self-directed learning behaviors of adult users of Twitter through the lens of the coronavirus pandemic during the second wave, which was summer and spring of 2020. So the objective was to identify Twitter behavior and usage patterns to assist in determining adults' awareness and use of media literacy and critical media literacy with the social media content they consume. So we all are familiar with what critical media literacy is, so I won't go over that. However, I want to identify the 4 objectives of critical media literacy skills as outlined by the Center for Critical Media Literacy, or the Center for Media Literacy. And they are being able to assess media content, to critically analyze media messages, to evaluate media representations, and to create alternative media content. So as I did my research, I wanted to focus on that, those 4 objectives and skills, and combine that with the idea of Andragogy, which is the art and science of helping adults learn, being student-centered and encouraging self-directed learning. And so that is a theory that was created and developed by Malcolm Knowles. And I thought with the idea of Paulo Freire's concept of liberation education, I thought that a lot of the elements partnered well with the Andragogy theory and with the concept of educational systems and structures empowering people and creating a self-directed learning environment where the teacher is the learner and the learner is the teacher. So with this, and you look at social media from an aspect of being very prevalent throughout the world, sometimes even more consumed than regular traditional media, which people are impacted by media from all different areas. However, they are not always aware of the messages they consume or critically analyze the messages they consume. So I looked at some of the work from Higdon where he said that social media reinforces fake news with little to no counter evidence, as well as the idea of the algorithms that exist in social media regurgitating or perpetuating confirmation biases. Someone mentioned biases earlier from consumers watching media content or consuming media content. And the algorithms that bring information back to people that they already like or already consume create information bubbles. And most people who aren't studying this don't always acknowledge or recognize that, which leads to confirmation bias. So another thing that people are missing the piece of information about is that media companies, internet companies, and social media companies collect data on every user to enhance their own critical insight into consumers' behaviors and attitudes, not necessarily to enhance or improve users' experiences. That's what's presented as why they're getting information. But it helps them, of course, to tailor and target information to specific audiences, niche audiences. So when people don't realize they're being targeted with these subtle and sometimes not so subtle marketing tactics, it creates an opportunity for people to be manipulated by the messages they consume. And so I think the purpose or what we could be looking to do more of is to encourage individuals to be more self-directed in their learning and their research about media content and messages that they consume so that they can have a more balanced view of messages, especially with coronavirus, as we have seen. But again, because of the algorithms, they're not going to go outside of their information bubbles unless they make a concerted effort to seek out people or accounts or organizations that might be presenting information from a different perspective. So with my research, I focused on qualitative research with a grounded theory approach. I had 2 focus groups. Each focus group had 5 to 6 people. And then in addition to that, I conducted 6 in-depth interviews. Because of COVID, I cannot have the larger groups that I had initially intended face-to-face, but we all understand that. So there were 3 major findings or 3 themes that I found from the research. And the first one, which was surprising to me, that most people were aware of their own biases. They were aware of their own biases. However, they were unwilling to step outside of their information bubbles as a form of self-preservation and self-protection against the divisive and hostile messages that they were experiencing. So on the other side of that, many of these same people who said that they don't step outside of those information bubbles actually used to follow people who had differing opinions and ideas than them before the pandemic began. But because of how they felt attacked and how they felt triggered to some degree, they stopped following those different accounts or stopped following even some family members and friends. So the next major finding that I identified was that the majority of people did not follow Twitter accounts of those with differing ideologies. However, they stayed connected to those other accounts. They would visit those accounts periodically so they would stay aware, but they didn't feel the need to be constantly fed the information and messages from those accounts. However, I believe it reduced their self-directed learning, the effectiveness of self-directed learning, by only tuning in just when they feel like it, as opposed to wanting to find out on a regular basis, as they do with information that they already agree with. So the next thing was that people with higher levels of media literacy were more willing to follow accounts of people with differing opinions. So I found out that many people, even people who said they studied mass communication or media, could not define media literacy or critical media literacy. Some people said they had not ever heard of media literacy. However, again, those people who said they studied mass comm or media couldn't define it. Now, even though they weren't well versed on how to describe it or define it, many of them still use some of those skills, as was outlined earlier, that I presented from the Center of Media Literacy, those 4 skill sets or objectives. They were able to identify, they identified specific skills that actually did line up with media literacy and critical media literacy. And then the final theme that I identified was that some people, while they were knowledgeable and aware, they wanted to get more involved with the political process as a result of what they saw on social media. So they started following some of the political leaders in their area, the task forces that were created in cities and counties and states to get more information to combat the misinformation and disinformation that they were seeing on Twitter. And they took it a step further and they felt a responsibility to provide information to their own followers, as well as their family members who may not have been exposed to the information. There was a strong sense of combating misinformation and disinformation within their own circles. And source credibility, trust, and accuracy were key elements in them deciding who they would follow or what organizations they would follow. And then the other thing, kind of minor, but still significant, I saw that people use Twitter not in a bubble. They use Twitter in tandem with other social media platforms, such as Facebook and Instagram, as well as Google. So they would, of course, we have the soundbite-ish kind of presentation of information on Twitter, and then they would go to Facebook to get a more expanded view or deeper information, and then going to Google to find other sources This is when that self-directed learning really kicked in, when they would take the initiative to find other sources that presented information on the topic so they could compare and contrast what they found. So I try to combine a few things. So I'm going to move on and try to close out. There were three changes that I saw, but one of the most significant changes that I saw was people going to follow people with political offices and elected officials. And part of the recommendations that I came up with kind of aligned with what Taylor and Lamoureux said, which was that the task of adult educators is to create learning environments which encourage adults' brains to be less susceptible to manipulation. And this is reflecting the liberation approach of education as identified by Fredo, as well as Kellner and Scher, who said that critical media literacy not only teaches people to learn from media, but to also resist media manipulation. So then our challenge is, how do we engage people in this lifelong learning process of critical media literacy and media literacy if they are not in a formal or traditional educational setting? And how do we create learning experiences for people without being in those settings? And also as educators, even if we can't get more media literacy or mass communication courses in our degree programs, can we work with other disciplines to incorporate more critical media literacy lessons or presentations that can be used by students in other courses from other disciplines? And this is, like I said, I know you all understand this, is that everyone is exposed to and heavily impacted by media and media messages. So therefore, it is important for us to understand the purpose of those media messages and how we can equip ourselves to protect ourselves and making the best decision for ourselves and our families. And that is it. Thank you very much. There's a question.
Thank you so much, Renee. It was such a great presentation.
Thank you.
Really very good one.
Gracias, bienvenida, maravilloso. Quisiéramos contar con más tiempo, pero quedan las tres invitadas a enviarnos un desarrollo más amplio, más profundo de sus presentaciones. Sé que Katherine intentó dosificar su tiempo, pero quedó con muchas cosas para decir. Igualmente Nicole, y ni hablar de Renee, que accedió más tarde. Y todos estamos muy interesados en cada una de ustedes, sus trabajos, sus investigaciones. Vamos a proponer al comité que pueda subir la profundización de sus temáticas a la página web del Congreso. Queremos agradecer la presencia de todas, de todos. Estamos ya un poco fuera del horario que nos permitimos este lujo porque no hay más conferencias por el día de hoy. Pero quisiera agradecer el apoyo de Michael, que ha estado siendo un apoyo para Eugenia y para mí en esta organización de mediadores, y todas las preguntas, aportes de los asistentes. Disculpa, Jennifer Posner, porque quedaste con tu mano levantada y la verdad es que ya no tenemos el tiempo de continuar. Sí, es súper interesante. Y me gustó mucho la idea de Elena Málaga. Vamos a crear comunidad. Este es el propósito de este congreso. Quienes estén interesados en la temática, justamente no importa de qué lugar del mundo seamos, el propósito es ampliar esta comunidad para pensar juntos y compartir saberes. Gracias Un gran aplauso para todos.
Los invitamos. We invite you all to participate tomorrow on Sunday and to continue enjoying this conference that we are all making together. So have a nice evening. See you tomorrow.